I bet you didn't know your phone's safety can be a sales script. One patch arrives, you feel safer, and someone else profits immediately. That's the trick of the zero-day market. The vulnerability never really disappears. A zero-day isn't just a bug. It's a deadline with a price tag. And the deadline can be monetized before the world even knows it exists. I bet you didn't know responsible disclosure can be used as camouflage, too. Sometimes the public story is, "We help fix security." Behind it, a deal closes. Zero-day brokers don't advertise like scammers. They sound like guardians. They package exploits with terms that feel clinical, responsible, and controlled. But the core product is access, the kind you can't unlearn once discovered. So what does safety mean when the vulnerability is sold, not cured? It means the buyer can claim legitimacy while the damage stays hidden. I bet you didn't know a phone exploit can be traded in stages like artwork. First comes the proof, then the method, then the weaponized version. Each handoff is a gate, and each gate can be priced. If you've ever wondered why fixes arrive late, this is part of the answer. While everyone waits for a patch, someone is already testing the exploit quietly. The market thrives because the knowledge is rare and time sensitive. And rarity makes defenders compete, not just coordinate. So the phone becomes a battlefield where updates are only one move. I bet you didn't know. Safety can be sold as a service, not a patch. Sometimes the buyer doesn't want ownership of the exploit, just continued access. That's when the relationship becomes long-term, and the secrecy becomes permanent. You can call it monitoring, testing, or threat research if you're careful. But the effect on regular people is the same. Their trust gets exploited. So how does a buyer keep the exploit alive after a patch is released? They don't rely on one vulnerability forever. They hunt for the next weakness. 0 days are a supply chain, and supply chains have replacements ready. I bet you didn't know the market's language can sound like procurement, not crime. Invoices, scopes, and delivery windows, clean words for dirty access. That's why victims rarely see the transaction, only the consequences afterward. A compromised phone can look normal while secrets drain silently. The malware may avoid obvious tricks like loud crashes or dramatic pop-ups. Instead, it favors stealth, timing, and selective access, like a lock-picking tour. I bet you didn't know 0 days can be used to map a device before doing anything loud. Recon turns a phone into a profile, apps, settings, permissions, habits. Once you know the shape of a person's phone, you know where to strike efficiently. That's why some victims report it just started, with no clear trigger. The trigger was prepared earlier, hidden inside a quiet chain of compromises. Now rewind to the moment the exploit was sold as safety. The pitch often focuses on defensive outcomes, fixes, reports, urgency, harm reduction. But the buyer can keep the working exploit while still funding the story. Because stories don't patch phones, implementations do. I bet you didn't know some markets are built on trust while operating on deniability. The participants learn each other's boundaries through small, controlled deals. Then the risk escalates, and the safety. Branding becomes more strategic. Why would anyone sell a 0 day if they truly wanted it fixed everywhere? Because the value is immediate power, not long-term repair. Repair takes time, power sells faster. I bet you didn't know the phone market creates a weird incentive loop for secrecy. If defenders get paid to discover bugs, discovery becomes a business model. When that business model also sells exploitation, disclosure stops being pure. The more valuable the exploit, the more it's guarded like a competitive advantage. So safety becomes a promise the market can rewrite whenever it needs to. I bet you didn't know legal can be flexible when definitions are vague. Authorization paperwork can arrive after the harm or never arrive at all. The result is a gap, a market without full accountability and without full visibility. Victims can't easily prove what happened, especially if the device behaves normally, and the people selling safety can always claim they were protecting someone. I bet you didn't know the most expensive exploits often target the shortcuts users never notice. A harmless click, a preview, a message, something that shouldn't matter becomes the doorway. That's why 0 days feel personal, even when the victim is just another number. Because the exploit is tailored to the way that phone processes trust. Once trust breaks, everything you do becomes uncertain. So what can ordinary people do when the battlefield is hidden? First, assume safety marketing can't see the whole ecosystem. Second, treat patches as necessary, not sufficient. Third, reduce the attack surface you control, permissions, links, and app installs. I bet you didn't know the 0-day market can survive even when fixes exist. Because while one flaw gets patched, another gets discovered and traded privately. It's a race where secrecy accelerates the finish line for buyers. And when secrecy wins, safety becomes theater for the public. I bet you didn't know your update schedule is part of the threat model now. Delay a fix, and you become the easy target for the time window that prophets want. But even fast updates don't remove risk from unknown future flaws. So the real question becomes, who gets to hold the keys to your security? In the 0-day market, the keys can change hands without your consent or your knowledge. And that is the safety lie. Your protection is not guaranteed by good intentions. It's guaranteed by transparency, verification, and accountability that the market resists. I bet you didn't know. The most alarming part isn't the exploit, it's the narrative. When the story says safety, the question is, safety for whom and at what cost? Because in the 0-day market, someone always buys power with secrecy. And someone always pays in silence, drained batteries, missing signals, unexplained behavior. I bet you didn't know a compromised phone can be a surveillance platform before you notice. The market doesn't need dramatic takeover. It needs quiet capture and control. That's why safety, language matters. It reduces friction